All right.
Okay.
Take your time.
Yep. I got my new one. I got this on sale for $15.
Did you watch that Carolina game?
Go ahead. No.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. A little late. Thank you very much. I'll accept a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. The minutes for February 21st and March 18th actually look pretty good. Does anyone have any comments?
I have to, I wasn't here the 25th, so
Okay.
I can't vote on that, I think.
The 21st, okay. Does anyone have any questions before I'll accept the motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a all those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Public comment, we'll take, no one's here, Campbell's up in the audience.
I'm sorry, who made the motion for the minutes? I'm sorry.
Bert did,
Thank you.
seconded by Fritz. And I just want to take this moment to welcome David Iverson to the commission as well. Good to have you here, and, we'll talk about how this all works over time. So, thank you. All right, so, Mike, you want to take over on item A?
Sure. This is a performance-based planning and programming agreement between the Mass DOT, Federal Transit Authority, the MPNEC, and the NRTA. We discussed this last month. Apparently, Derek can probably provide a little bit more insight on this. But we had a draft agreement at the last meeting. We shared that with you all, and now it's kind of the time to approve it. A copy of the agreement's in the packet.
What page is that on, Mike, if you don't mind, if you know?
It starts on page 26 of the packet.
Okay.
And Paula Leary from the NRTA is here. She may have a question to ask.
Oh, I'm sorry, Paul, I didn't identify you. I apologize for that. That was like terrible. I'm so sorry. I consider you sort of one of us, so I didn't even think of it.
But
Okay.
if there's any other clarity that you need on the background on this, I'd
Yeah.
have to lean on Derek Schuster to provide that. If there's any questions from the NRTA, I would, again, lean on Derek to kind of clarify that. But the staff recommendation is to approve this agreement
Okay.
so that we can get started on the data sharing.
Derek, do you want to comment, or shall Paul, comment first, or what would work for you?
I think that Mike did a good job summarizing it. I know that Brian Pounds had attended MARTA, which I believe Paula was at as well, and that MARTA gave the thumbs up on the agreement. Paula,
Okay.
did you want to comment on it at all?
Yeah, Paula Leary, NRTA Administrator. I wasn't at that meeting, Derek, but I do know that it was discussed and my fellow administrators have signed. I think just for the commission's information, I had some questions about some of the wording and phrasing, and FTA recommended some changes to Mass DOT, and some of the administrators added some changes, and those have been incorporated, so I'm all good now with this.
Okay. I mean, these things are so complicated. The Cliff Note version is great when that can happen, Paul. So you're good with this now, the
Yep.
changes they made?
Yep, and also just to point out, for the TAM plan,
Yep.
the NRTA opted out of Mass DOTs, and when it is time for the rurals to submit the security safety plan, the NRTA will also be opting out of Mass DOT's plan and doing its own.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I unfortunately was not at the last meeting. Could I get like a 2-minute summary of what this is? I don't want, it's just generally,
Derek would be the best, I think.
okay, just a short summary so at least I know what we're doing.
Yeah, so this doesn't change anything that we're already doing. It just codifies that all of the different agencies have adopted their respective performance measures and plans and data that they share. It's a federal requirement that the different agencies and MPOs across the Commonwealth agree to this, which is why input was considered from the different MPOs to land on this final draft of a document. But again, it doesn't change anything that NRTA or Nantucket planning is doing right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Meaning like how everything works is still the same, right, Paula? We don't have to.
Buses will still be on the road.
Okay, good news. Mike, anything from you before we
No,
close this out?
I wouldn't want to belabor this point, but a lot of this information will bleed over into the TIP discussion.
Oh,
like
okay.
Paula mentioned TAM, that's the transit
I was
asset
looking for
management.
that. I don't like to ask. I like to
Yeah.
find stuff in here, and it's hard.
Yeah, but everything is
I've heard
performance-based
that one, yeah.
management now. We have to set a benchmark for
Yep.
achieving a certain measure of quality.
Yeah.
And with our safety numbers that you've already approved, we basically set a benchmark of we don't want any more crashes than this.
Okay.
And we go back and we measure what were the crashes that were experienced and how do they compare with the benchmarks we had set. It's that line of logic that we're using with this. And with the NRTA, the TAM, the Transit Asset Management Plan, they like to keep 100% of their vehicles in good operating condition. She just reports back, the odometers, what they're reading, how old the vehicle is, those types of measurables,
Okay.
so that we can ensure that we have good quality vehicles on the road. That's basically the point of all this.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. Thank you. So, anyone want to make a motion to, I guess, approve this change? Is that what we're doing, Mike?
You want to, Derek, clarify the recommendation, but they're approving the agreement?
Correct.
Okay. So approve or endorse or approve, I guess. Is
It's
the
to
word.
approve or adopt the agreement.
Adopt. Okay.
Okay.
There you go. Okay.
I would move that the commission adopt the performance-based planning and programming agreement with FTA, Mass DOT, and NRTA.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Unanimous, Eleanor. Thank you for that. And Paula, thank you for that very much. Okay. So the next thing, Mike, the grant opportunity.
Correct. There is on page 38 of your packet, and I'm going to go
Okay.
there is a PowerPoint presentation, and again, I believe Mass DOT was going to lead this presentation. Just in a nutshell, a transition plan is essentially ensuring that those with disabilities can actually access public facilities and have accessibility within public ways. And in order to document where there's deficiencies, there's what's called a transition plan that's developed, and that essentially highlights your priority areas and what areas need to be addressed for improving accessibility. And there's grant money that's available, and that's the crux of this presentation, is to let you all know that there is grant money available for developing a transition plan. Also, so you know, the select board has already executed a contract to conduct a transition plan, so it's already been funded locally. But this is an opportunity to kind of understand if there's additional funds available for any type of supplemental work, I believe, to be done. But I'll lean on Derek to kind of clarify the presentation.
Yeah, so thank you, Mike. The ADA, when it was implemented in the 90s, required municipalities to have ADA transition plans, and currently only about half of Massachusetts communities have such a plan, and other communities across the state that failed to establish one have actually been litigated against, which is problematic. So part of the benefit to these these MOD grants is to assist communities that need to establish an ADA transition plan or would like to improve their plans, which have to be updated every 3 years, with additional monies, whether they want to hire a consultant or work with their MPO or JTC. The grants are typically $25,000 to $40,000, and it's usually a Department of Public Works or a municipality itself or a consulting agency that works on putting the plans together. And we're not looking for any action on this. It's information only. That's great to hear that the select board's begun funding it locally. But if for some reason they were looking for additional planning dollars, this is just a resource available to Nantucket.
Mike, I have a question.
Go right ahead.
Does Mickey Rowan know about this?
Yes, and Commission on Disability is actually one of the stakeholders in the town's transition
Okay.
planning process. I met with them earlier this month for the long-range transportation plan coordination, and that was discussed, just
Okay.
their involvement with the transition plan development.
Okay, great.
Just a
Yes.
question. So any questions relating to how this would affect a historic
Right.
area and, streets and things like sidewalks and things like that? Is that something that the select board has already considered? Or is that anything we should be considering? Or is that just, no?
It's got to be,
ADA is ADA.
Yeah, ADA is ADA. There's an architectural advisory board through the state that actually enforces these
Yeah.
requirements. Any deviation from those requirements requires a waiver, which is issued by the architectural advisory board,
Yeah.
which is a state agency. So that would be the process. If there's a historic public building and creating a ramp would have some kind of negative effect, a waiver would need to be granted by the AAB
But it
to
is
not
whatever it
install that
is, and
ramp.
we're not specifically approving something that we don't
right.
know the effect of.
Tritz is asking about, what's going on downtown. I mean, it's not rocket science.
I'm deliberately
I'm
trying not to
thinking
use
it.
Main
I just
Street as
didn't
an
say
issue.
anything. I'm thinking about it.
I was not trying to back into that. I was just, I just wanted to know whether we should be asking any questions, just so that we know what we're doing. But if it is what it is and somebody else would deal with those issues, then I'm fine.
Okay, yeah,
Understand what I mean?
yeah.
Years ago, when I owned a building downtown as a commercial building, I met with one of those waivers where I did not have the access and the width of the sidewalk, so or the means to put a ramp. So I was able. I did get a letter from the Attorney General, so they are on top of it, and to I guess. Get my waiver, I would have to put in a button or a buzzer so that if someone did come, you
Yeah.
actually were able to provide the service that you wouldn't normally provide if they were able to use a ramp to get
Yeah.
inside. So there was an option.
I'm okay as long as
Yeah.
we're not approving something.
That's,
Could I just follow
No,
up on
it's information only,
Yeah.
but if you go to page 54 of the packet that Mike put together, the bottom slide that reads MOD grant, the third to last slide in the presentation, has information regarding application process and deadlines, websites for more information, and who to contact if any of you are interested in applying for the grant.
Could I follow up, Mr. Chair? To follow up on what Fritz was just asking, I want to be sure I understand too, who's the lead entity on Nantucket, keeping an eye on whether we are compliant, and who would be the entity that would be seeking grants if there's grant money available? This is coming to us for information, but I'd like to understand who it is that would also get this information, who might have a basis on which to submit a grant if it's not us.
Yeah. Right now, the transition plan is being developed by the select board, so, and their department that's managing this is
It's
Department of
the-
Public Works,
okay.
specifically their facilities division.
So this is just for us because it's transit related insofar as it's people moving
Money
around.
side.
And because this does touch the public way and making like sidewalk accessibility and not just a public facility accessibility into a building,
Okay.
but the sidewalks and things as
Okay,
well.
thank you.
Yep.
okay. So, Derek, do we need action on this to accept this, or is this just an
No,
ongoing
it's
information?
informational.
Okay, perfect, okay. All right, so does anyone else have any questions before we move to the next item? We'll go to item C, Mike, then, and start talking about that, which you had said that some of this Nerda stuff's gonna come up again, so there it is.
Yeah, the draft addendum was not in the packet, but under item 3 on page 17, if you don't mind going all the way back to the beginning, the FY 19 to 22 tip, which is the tip that we're using right now in this fiscal year, has nothing to do with the draft tip 20 that we're going to talk about next. But the 19 tip needs to be amended to include the performance management and performance targets that we had just discussed earlier in the meeting, such as the transit asset management plan performance measures. That needs to be included in the document. So what we would need to do is amend the tip to add an addendum to the tip that includes that language. So the action that would be needed is to authorize a 21-day public review of Amendment 1 to the FFY 2019 to 2022 Transportation Improvement Program to add that language.
But we don't have Amendment 1 here.
It's should be in the packet. It's a one-pager, but it's not in the packet, no. But the nutshell is that.
So would it be a proper motion, Mr. Chair, to say, to authorize staff to include Amendment 1 as part of a public notice for public review during this period on the basis that Amendment 1 does what is specified on page 17?
What do you think, Mike?
I don't know if I followed that, I'm sorry. I'll say yes.
I know.
But I think I followed it enough.
Well, we can't say approve Amendment 1 if we don't have the text before us, right? So it seems like,
So,
And you wouldn't approve.
this is Derek, if I can
Yeah.
chime in for
Yeah.
a moment. Language for the amendment is literally a copy and paste of the adopted TAM plan and performance measures that this body has already adopted. The amendment is for it to be added into the current 2019 to 2023 tip. It's a STIP requirement from our federal partners that all MPOs and JTCs across the Commonwealth include the adopted TAM and performance measure targets in their current tip. It's also consistent with what would be included in the 2020 to 2024 tip. Correct, Mike?
Yeah, and good point, because it's actually in your packets in the 2020 tip. So you'll see the language there. It's just, shame on me for not actually including that specific one-pager in between the sheets here in this packet.
So it's basically just the TAM.
Exactly. The tip was approved in June of last year. The TAM was approved in September, so there was a disconnect between the timelines of those two documents. The tip needs to include the language of the TAM, so we have to go back and edit the tip by adding in an addendum that includes that language from the TAM. So that's what we're doing right now, is amending the tip to include that language and editing the document.
So, Mr. Chairman, if
Okay.
Judith is making
Go ahead.
that motion, I'll second it.
And it was, just to be
I don't know
specific,
if
the
that's what she was
action.
doing, though.
I was trying, but I'm sort of giving up because to make a proper motion, I would think I should refer to a page and a specific thing of what we're saying.
Yeah.
But from what I
Page
understand,
139.
Page 139.
That's where so 138 is where the performance-based planning and measures begins.
so
So it'd be the language from that page down through 143.
Okay.
it stopped before funding categories in 143.
Yes.
It's before funding categories, correct?
Okay.
Sorry.
Thanks, Derek.
So that language he
Okay.
just led you to is the new language that we added. The action that would be asked from tonight is to authorize a 21-day public review period. And at the next meeting in May, 20th, I believe, you would take action to approve that amendment.
Okay.
So wait a minute, but we're dealing with 2019 to 2022, right?
Correct.
So,
But
Three.
this is for
23, I'm sorry.
but this is for the public review period.
Correct. We would authorize public review by statute. We have to send these documents out that we're amending, we're editing, out for public review to let the public comment on them. If there's no comments within that 21-day period, you would simply approve the amendment.
Okay. So we're not approving this now. We're just authorizing the public thing, Judith, and then we approve it in May. Which I didn't understand that either. So I'm just saying, that's what we're
Well,
doing.
I'll try one more time, then I'll let somebody else try, okay? I move that we treat the language on page 138 to 143, ending just before the reference to funding categories, as the equivalent of amendment number 1 to the 2019 tip, and that we second authorize that language, which is the equivalent of amendment 1, be put forth for public comment,
Public review.
public review.
Is that good, Mike?
That
I mean,
sounds
Derek, is that good?
very thorough.
Okay,
That's good in so many words.
okay. And Bert seconded.
May I
Great.
read that back, please? It was slightly convoluted, but I got there. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, it's, she's
Motion to
saying,
Read the language on page 138 to 143 before a reference to funding categories as the equivalent of amendment number 1.
yep,
I sort of lost the track.
amendment number 1
And then
and 2
authorize that language be put forth for
for the public review period for 21 days.
As an amendment to the 2019 tip, is that proper?
2019 to 2023, right, Mike?
Yeah.
2020.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
2023.
3, okay.
As an amendment to the 2019 to 2023 tip.
Yep,
Eleanor, you want to read it again, or is that? Okay.
okay.
And
So
Bert
Bert
seconded.
seconded, Eleanor. Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Welcome, Andrew. How are you? I didn't even see you, so just looking to the left. Okay, unanimous, Eleanor. Thank you for that, and thank you for all the help, Derek, on this stuff. This stuff is, yeah, it's just the way it is. Frank Spriggs told me this 12 years ago, and it hasn't changed. Okay, Mike, long-range plan update. Are we on that now?
Yes, and
This whole
there,
demographic thing, are we still doing that?
yeah,
Okay.
and quite honestly, I'm going to avoid giving the presentation if that's all right, and just because you've all seen
the
it,
same
all
one.
but one
Yep.
have already never seen it.
Yeah.
So-
Sorry, David, this
No,
is
that's right. It's not in
brutal,
the packet
brutal.
anyway.
I think you would all do something to me after the meeting if I went through all this. So I'll offer to answer any questions you might have by reviewing the demographics. I'll note that the most what you should pay attention to and what is brand new
Yes.
information are
Great.
the survey results that begin on page. Was this 92?
So it's in our regular packet here.
In your
Okay,
regular
great.
packets, beginning on page 92, and this was soliciting public comments on the vision, goals, and objectives
Okay,
that's in the long-range transportation plan. So there are a number of different comments on those that you can feel free to highlight. We can also discuss this next meeting, but there were 134 comments made on the goals and objectives. The roadway, bike, and pedestrian public transportation facilities were also sorted or ranked by those who participated in the survey. So the results of those are included here as well. There's also information on where the person took the survey, where they live, and where they spend most of their time. So that's interesting information as well. Nearly 40% of respondents go to downtown. So it basically verifies the fact that a lot of people live in a variety of areas of the island, but a large portion of them live, work, or spend a significant amount of time in downtown. So there were not too many other statistics that were too surprising. Predominant modes of getting around the island were driving alone, which is not surprising. The census tells us that 66% of users, of those who commute by driving alone. This actually conforms with that sentiment. Although I was surprised that the second mode that's used most is just walking. Not necessarily biking or using the bus or carpooling, but if you're not driving alone, you're walking to where you need to go, which is kind of reinforces the need for a sidewalk and paths and those kinds of things, which also were some of the higher scoring projects out of the universal projects that were included in the survey. So if you haven't had a time to peruse these survey results, we can absolutely talk about this at the next meeting. which is the meeting that you would use to discuss the draft document before you sent that out for public review. So I'm happy to answer questions now, but this is more of just briefly presenting the information.
I want to thank you. That's very interesting information. A couple questions that I want to see if Paul wanted to comment on any of what she saw here as to NERDA, any insights you would have, but maybe Mike, first to you, if there, it may not be possible to do this. I know SurveyMonkey, and I know it has certain limitations, but I was interested whether there's any way to tell if people living in different parts of the island had different priorities, like if people living in Nantucket, and we had a high response from Tom Nevers, and a lot of people said they really felt there need to be better bus service and paths up there, and I can really appreciate that. And it seemed like the Nantucket response rate was sort of lower, and I would have thought maybe that would have been higher. But do you see what I mean? That you might expect different priorities depending on where people were living or how old they were, if they had school kids. That's fancy analysis, and you may not have the wherewithal to do it. I just wondered if by any chance you did, if there was anything out of that kind of a sort that you would want to share.
SurveyMonkey's very limited amount of regression analysis you can do. Regression meaning that of the people that answered the survey from Tom Nevers, what were their commuting characteristics? You can do that to an extent, but you can't really select multiple inputs, such as those who are from Tom Nevers in Wisconsin. How do they get around? It's very limited. So it would just take a lot of time to do that level of regression.
and
I'm very curious at those types of answers myself. It just, again.
Well, it was just wondering if that was even possible, but.
Oh, yeah, absolutely it is.
And I don't know what others would say, but it struck me that even if you did just one sort in terms of by locale where people lived, whether that would tell you anything, because in part, if you've got a low representation of, like Nantucket has a high population in the summer, I know there were people who were really thinking about the sidewalk issue downtown, so there was a lot of response on that.
Yes, a lot.
That if we take that to mean everybody in the island has that as a priority, that might be an error, right? Depending. So
Yeah.
I know you've got a lot of things on your plate. I was just curious whether, even as a first cut, or whether anybody else thinks this is a good idea to try to see. And I'm just very curious, because some of the improvements, say people living in a particular area that would be immediate to a roundabout or a bike path or something, might have a strong opinion there, and everybody else might say, we don't know. And then it seems like, especially you were working on this before the town meeting and before the election, and then when you see strong support for various things like rotaries,
Yeah.
you sort of wonder what the disconnect is on there, and I don't know the answer
Money.
to that.
I think we're paying for it.
So I just didn't know if there's anything you happen to be able to see into the data that didn't come out when you printed out like this, or whether you think there's anything worth trying to mine out in more detail. I noticed too, there were some absolute contrary things, like some people said we need a parking garage, other people said no, it'll just bring more cars.
Yeah.
Some people said we need to restrict cars, other people said that's communistic and evil, and we don't want to go there. So it just, as you try to process it, or we try to put it into a plan, it's you just want to wrap your head around that to know which things are maybe guiding you down a path that may not be the exact reality.
Yeah. Our staff role is to assist the decision makers and provide quantitative and qualitative information. And the survey was meant to be more qualitative. It was a 400 plus response rate, so that was very good. I think the Cape Cod region, on a very similar survey, got 275 responses. So
Really? Wow.
Apparently this community loves taking surveys. It's not the most responses we've ever got back from a survey, but it's significant. But you can't really extrapolate like ballot results and try to correlate with it, because there's some degree of error there. So it's hard to extrapolate that. As time goes by, we'll definitely be referring back to this survey instead of doing another one. Refer back to this and see if there's some regression we can pull from that. Just haven't taken the step. The survey closed April 19th, so just haven't
Sure.
taken the time to go and do
When you
that.
bring back the next iteration of the draft, how are you going to deal with the places where there's clear, opposite viewpoints? Are there ways you can kind of flag topical things that we should be thinking about? Maybe do that before the meeting so we really know what those are and what the alternative approaches might be?
I think you've raised two of them that I'd probably go back and look for, the vehicle limitation and the garages. If you look at the providing parking, there was a high number of that really wanted to add more parking downtown. I don't know if that means a garage, or I don't know if they meant that they were saying for a garage, but it leaves you to, they want a condition to change. They want an increase in supply. When you said about vehicle limitations, I can go back through and look at the comments that we received and just count those up. We can share that, and then maybe do exactly what you suggested, do a little bit of a regression. Do people who live in downtown want limitations more than people who live outside of town? Because people outside of town
Or
are
vice
probably more
versa.
auto-dependent, right? So I'm sure we can do some kind of exercise like that to demonstrate that. Again, it's to aid decision-making. I don't want to make the decision. It's kind of your pleasure to kind of do
you.
that. I'm just supplying you the information and helping you along the way. I think we're both interested in this type of information, so I'm happy to drill into this.
I mean, the survey, Mike, I don't mean to interrupt, Brutus.
no.
You just brought something up, Mike, that I didn't think of. You know, the parking garage issue from 15 years ago to now is a whole opposite question. It's not a parking garage, it's a piece of land that is gonna be given to the town that doesn't own it. Because the AMP parking lot, and I call it that because I have to,
We all do.
we don't own it. And there's a plan to change that. And it's not the same question it was before when we wanted to put a parking garage and not get, that parking lot wasn't discussed about being developed at that time. So it's a completely different question now.
Yeah.
It should be worded something like, if and when the owners, it's not us, that we entitled locals park in this parking lot like we own it, which we have since 1965, and that may not be there forever.
Yeah.
It may not be its same size, it may be less parking, so then would we favor a parking garage? That's really how it has to be structured, but the problem is, it doesn't get said that way.
And
Right.
it was
You know what I mean?
I deliberately didn't use the word parking garage because you can interpret that to mean anything. I called it increased downtown parking opportunities.
Yeah.
And there was well over 70% that supported increasing parking opportunities. Again, no one knows what
Without
that
any
means.
reason.
But it's
Yeah,
another
any,
question, it's another step
examples.
you can take.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just saying, as far as the Harbor Place situation wasn't in existence when we talked about a parking garage. And actually, there was a survey, wasn't there a question in the ballot that said, do we support a concrete something?
Not this past year, but.
No,
Yeah.
back, and that was about
Which is
10
why
years
I
ago,
avoided
wasn't
that
it,
language.
Andrew? Maybe 10, 15?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's all in how you say it, you know? Like I said, if we voted, we wouldn't have supported a fast ferry in 1994 if we said what it really was. We would have said we don't
Hey,
want it.
Mike.
So, anyway,
This is Derek from MassDOT. Just for a couple of the questions asking about trends and some of the feedback to the survey. I've done a lot of work with SurveyMonkey in the past. There's this really nifty word cloud feature under Analyze Results when you're on the site. I would recommend for some of the topics that people submitted random thoughts into, that you just make a word cloud and throw into the report if you're looking for what common themes are that people were saying to any of the questions. You don't really need more than one or two of them tops, but
Does everybody
sounds
know what a
like
word cloud is?
that's a very low list.
Word cloud
throw
is
into the
like,
report.
it's got big type if there were a lot, it's got little type if there's only a
oh,
few.
I see.
Yeah.
So it's like a visualization
Yeah.
technique.
And you can mold it into different shapes to be fun and things. But the point is to highlight the words that are important to people.
Yeah, so if you had 400 people respond to the survey and 10 of them said parking garage, but 200 of them said the word bicycle, then bicycle would be in really big letters and parking garage would be a really small phrase next to it.
Yeah. I can work on something like that. if
Yeah.
that-
So that sounds good, Mike. I mean, because we're gonna be doing more of these, so
Okay.
I would assume this looks like a Facebook page the way it's written right now. So,
Yeah, sorry to add more to your plate, just I thought that.
no, it's not more, it's a better idea maybe, you know? We could use some.
Sure.
So, Judith, are you all set?
I was just wondering
Okay.
if Paula would comment, then I'll be quiet here.
Oh.
Just if she said anything about NERDA.
I haven't seen the survey results.
Okay.
I'm looking at the.
Yeah, you got,
everything, though.
I'm sure you'd like, yeah. Oh, the Ferry Connector? I didn't see that. Oh, I'm okay, I wasn't
Mike's
looking
not
at that
allowed
one.
to say that word to me.
No, I know. I like the golf cart comment, although there's definitely, we should have golf carts allowed in town. There's no question about that. That's like a no-brainer. I don't understand why we don't.
I think in the past, the problem was you could not register them to go on the road.
We got mopeds parked in car spaces all day in Nantucket. We can have a golf cart. So that's my
Well,
answer to that.
You gotta call out. the
All
police and
day,
the state.
20 feet of space.
The local and state police seem to be the problem with it.
Crazy. So what else we got here, Mike? What are we supposed to do now with this?
I'll let you know that at the May 20th meeting, there'll be a significant amount of time devoted to going over the transportation plan and what it includes, and some comments that were received by some of the stakeholder agencies, such as the airport, the ferries, but I'm also reaching out to Commission on Disability, Elder Services, Human Services, and all the rest. A town association, it's just so many, my head is spinning. I
You were
couldn't even
just
tell you.
there the
what-
other day, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just let you know that the May 20th meeting, will be a lot of more time devoted to combing through the transportation plan, probably not focusing on demographics, because you all kind of know that, but going over project descriptions, prioritizations, and scoring, as well as comments that were received. And we can focus on comments received by sharing some of these techniques for this survey.
Because I think we'll get back to the survey thing in item E, as far as some thoughts about some different, we're gonna have to look at that, some survey stuff about where we are as a community, what we do, what do we really want, and what we don't, because it's getting, we're like stuck in the middle, 16 votes, we lose something, we win it at town meeting, but we lose it by, a hair at the ballot box, So, anyway, so we don't need any action on that, right?
We do not know.
Okay, but the next one, we do, correct?
The next one we do, yes. This is the review funding schedule and candidate project. This is the FY 2020 to 2024 Transportation Improvement Program. This one actually does have some material in the packet.
What page is that, Mike?
That's 132. It starts on.
Save these survey results, so that's good. Okay,
And just so you know, there are no highway projects programmed in the TIP this year, but you should know that we did receive an award for a Safe Routes to School grant up to $1 million for improvements to a section of Surfside Road and the pedestrian crossing there in front of the school.
Yep.
That's federal aid, but it's not being included in the TIP. But that will happen this year. You're also familiar with the ongoing work on Milestone Road, the safety and accessibility improvements. Has nothing to do with the widening of Milestone Road or the Rotary. Those would be separate initiatives that we'll pursue. And those improvements are listed in the supplemental list there on the public notice. But again, there's no highway projects programmed. However, there are NRTA operational assistance funds that are included in the TIP. So those are there for your review. There's really not a whole lot to discuss with this version of the TIP because a lot of our candidate projects are over budget and we're waiting on guidance. We talked about that at the last meeting on how do we reconcile those in the future. But the action that it's being sought for this meeting is just like with the TIP amendment for the FY19 TIP, we would need to release this for a 21-day public review and then take this up again at the May 20th meeting to actually approve the FY20 document.
okay.
Can we go through
Yes.
this?
Yes, no, go ahead, Fritz, that's fine.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'd like you to lead us through what this plan says.
Okay. The TIP, Transportation Improvement Program, is a fairly required document listing 5 years worth of federal aid-funded transportation improvements.
Yep.
there currently are no federal aid transportation improvements included in the highway section. So there's really not a lot to report there other than the funding targets, which are approximately $500,000 to $550,000 annually. The projects that we would like to program to the tip are in the magnitude of $2 million. So there's a bit of a disconnect there, and we would need to wait for that actual fiscal year, federal fiscal year that we're in, and hope that there's discretionary funds that we could utilize.
Mike,
to
I'm not
program.
understanding what you're saying.
Okay. We don't get nearly enough federal funding. We only get $500,000. Our projects are $2 million. So we haven't programmed any of our projects that we have that are programmable into the tip because we're just simply not allowed to. That wouldn't demonstrate financial constraint to say we want to fund $2 million project with $500,000. The community would need to wait for Mass DOT to notify this body that additional funds are available whenever we are in these future fiscal years. If in fiscal year 21, the state has some available funds because of whatever reason, they'll notify us and tell us that our candidate project, call it the Surfside Road, Bartlett Road Roundabout, which is $3.5 million. If there are funds to actually construct that project available at the federal and state level, they'll notify us and we can program that project into the tip because it's receiving federal aid. We can't do that right now because there are not enough funds to construct that project.
Okay. But by approving the tip, we are approving what we want to have done, correct?
The schedule and what we want.
The use of those funds right now.
Priority of what we want to have done in terms of highway improvements is approved by us and it's in the tip. Is that correct?
What federal funds you want to use to fund a project are included in the tip. Right now, we have $524,711 that we're not programming. We don't have a project to spend $500,000 on, so we're not programming a project in there. What you're referring to, I think what you're referring to, if this is all right, Mr. Chairman, I'll say that the prioritization of projects are in the transportation plan. In order to have a project put into this tip document, program it in there, it has to be listed in and prioritized by the transportation plan, which we just discussed. That is the pool of projects you can draw from and include them into this planning document.
And if I could just add on to what Mike's saying, in the tip, when you want to put a project that you may have the funding for, like in 2021, you see $535,000 that's not programmed. A condition of programming a project is that it's also gone through the process of design readiness and the whole public component of weighing in on a project in order to program it by that time. So it's not just a factor of Nantucket doesn't have something in that year and they're just letting money go. It means that projects that you establish in your regional transportation plan need to go through an additional process of design preparedness in order to place it into one of those years to be programmed. So if you have a project that you think would be ready to be programmed in 2025, then that doesn't come into this tip, but it would in next year's, for example.
Mike, what Derek just said, you said that before.
Correct.
And I'll tell you when. Phase 1, phase 2, and then that little goofy thing we did on Pulpus Road that I flipped out about and couldn't understand because we didn't have anything. We had to use
the road
tip money.
resurfacing
Remember that
project
little
that we did
thing
on
we did?
Pulpus? Yeah.
If you could just explain that, what we did then, maybe that will help explain Fritz, because what he just said, I've heard you say that before.
Yeah.
Not exactly the same as he did, but it's the same basic principle. The readiness part
Correct.
versus the public review versus how we have to pay for the engineering costs. All that stuff is all part of this tip process. We've had the Bartlett Road thing in the tip, and we've had it out of the tip. You know what I'm saying? Like in and out a couple of different times over the last how many years. So can you just explain that maybe that way to Fritz? The 300,000 a year, is it 5 now? I thought it was 3 something.
Yeah, I was very incomplete in my explanation, but I was trying
Yeah.
to keep it as simple as I
Yeah.
could on this one thing. The readiness is a huge factor to this. In order to program a project into the tip, not only do you need to be below the funding that you're available, so you demonstrate financial constraint. A preliminary design also needs to be submitted to DOT and accepted as a prerequisite to program a project into the tip. And right now, we don't have a project that has preliminary design approved by DOT. The closest one we have is the Bartlett and Surfside Road intersection, which has been
Yes.
submitted, but they're not through that preliminary design process. And again, I was trying to help you out, Fritz, because you were talking about a universe of prioritization of the universe of projects. And that's done through a separate process, the transportation planning, long-range transportation planning process, which was the previous item on the agenda. This does say how you want to allocate your federal funds that this region does get by right. Again, $500,000. We just don't have a project that's, one, under $500,000, and two, at a design readiness stage that we can actually program them in.
How did we do Cliff Road? Didn't we use more than 1 year? for that?
Yes,
Okay.
what's called advanced construction. We start constructing a project in advance of the funding becoming available. So I believe that was done in 2009 and 10, or used fiscal year 2009 and 10 money. And the construction was started in 2009, but we just couldn't program a project in 10 because we spent the money the previous year.
That's a big important point right there. That's why I just thought of it. I think you can use more than 1 year's money for something, because you keep saying under 5. We'll never have anything under 5. So, we might, but not likely.
Yeah.
So, because I remember that.
There's also a huge control on, so you can't advance construct a project over 5 years unless it's actually legitimately, you need to, it takes 5 years to build that project.
Okay.
I think much larger projects probably fall within that. But we've generally only used, say, 2 years of advanced construction because the projects are relatively small and can be built within a 2-year time frame.
Okay. So, Judith, go ahead. Sorry.
On that point, I wanted to say, I think the bike path is closest to a widely accepted desired program.
Phase 2, right?
It would seem
You're
to
talking
me
about.
that it could be done in chunks. Is there any possibility that going along with your point, that be stretched over like 4 years? Don't we have a preliminary design on that? I thought we did.
Are you referring to the in-town bike path Orange Street section?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we just had that funding approved at this past town meeting, so it
Right.
will take some time in order to develop preliminary design and then submit that to DOT.
Now,
But
when
we
you say
can
funding, you mean the design engineering?
construction. We've
Okay. All right.
to
It's
really
not-
complicate
Then
this.
it's not in the tip.
To
then.
really complicate this, we authorized enough funding to design and construct it locally. However, we will be submitting that project for federal funding
Yeah.
so that we don't have to obligate
See?
all the
No,
local
that
funding that we've authorized.
out.
So we
Right.
authorized
So what-
2.5 million, but we
One
don't
thing
necessarily have to obligate all of that.
I'm wondering here, if I'm sitting out in the public and I get this notice and it just lists things at the bottom with no priority, I'd feel kind of like, what are you asking me to say? Whereas if it said, this board thinks, this commission thinks that the top priority is the bike path to stretch over so many years, wouldn't that give people a clear idea about having an opinion on that? Why do we not set a priority in advance of going out if it's possible to do what you say, like that could be programmed 2021, 22, 23, 24, $500,000 a year, and that's pretty near the whole of it, right?
Yeah, to my earlier point of advanced construction, there really has to be a connection between the time it takes to build a project and the years of funding that you allocate to that project. If
How long does it take to, it feels like bike paths take a long time here, right? Especially downtown.
Well, those do.
This may be a simple one that can be done in one off season. You could perhaps make an argument that it'll take 2 off seasons to do, so perhaps 2 years of funding. The problem is 2 years of funding is $1 million and it's a $2 million project. Probably could if there was non-participating funds, which we've already authorized here locally.
Right.
The town,
Well,
instead of spending the entire 2.5 million, could maybe pony up, say, $1 million.
Right, well,
And then the other $1 million comes from the state and federal government.
The other question I had is why the split, or how does it split between highway projects and transit projects? Because NERDA could use any amount of money. I mean, to have the ferry shuttle back again, or, oh, sorry if you don't like that. But, I mean, it seems to me, do they dictate which amounts are in which of those two categories? So we can't say, take anything that we haven't programmed for highway use and put it into transit projects?
We could flex funds, which we've done in the past, to do something like if the NRTA didn't have capital to purchase a bus, for instance. We've had in the past flexed highway money over to transit so that they can purchase a bus. I don't believe we're in a situation like that. And also there's already transit capital allocated. The state's been very generous about funding transit recently. So there should be plenty of capital for bus purchases, but that is absolutely an option that could be available. And we've used that in the past.
Well, but this is the last one, I'm sorry. Just if we're putting things out for the public to comment, if I received this, I wouldn't have any idea what you were asking me. And I also wouldn't understand without an explanation what you've said to us about what can be in this cluster compared to what can't be in this cluster. So I don't know whether there's a time constraint that I see this, you want to put it out effective tomorrow or whatever to expedite it for a 3-week period. But if it's been put out the way it is, do we then get to look at it again and say, we think the priority should be this, or Paula could decide if she needs a new bus or, whatever, and we come back at it again? Otherwise, it seems like it's kind of a circle of not getting very far for decisions.
Well, first we need the tip approved because it contains highway projects and transit projects. So we wouldn't want to jeopardize operational funding for the NRTA by not approving a tip. So we do have to develop a tip and do it. This highway section of it, which I think you're most concerned about and things, right now currently has no projects programmed in it. So there's no prioritization of projects that are in there. There's no projects in there. The discussion on prioritization would happen if we could program a project or multiple projects. And then you all, because you have the right as a regional planning agency, you have the right to decide which one of those projects would use federal funds. The others would be implemented by some other means. Perhaps the select board would like to fund those projects. But you have the right on assuming there's demonstrating financial constraint and the project's not too expensive beyond what the budget's available. There is design process that's already been gone through. If there are 2 projects to pick from under that scenario, the pleasure would be among this board on selecting which one of those projects would advance, or not at all. So I hope that answers the question about programming projects in there. And if you're the public and you're looking at this, there's no projects in here so if I'm the public, I would ask the question of why aren't the $524,000 being allocated to a project? The short answer is there's not a project that's ready and within budget, unfortunately.
So I have a question when I look at this.
Okay.
I mean,
David, I'm going to get to you.
No,
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, if it says this tip prioritizes a listing of federally funded projects, basically, to be undertaken in the next 5 years. You look at the first item, improvements on Milestone Road, $3 million too. So is that saying that federal funds are available and have been made available for that, or we want $3 million in federal funds to do that?
Correct. That was already through a previous tip process about a year or 2 ago. So that's already been, we already amended those previous tips to include that project in there.
Okay. But then that has been funded?
Oh, yeah, the contract's already executed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you go down to the next one, which is the Surfside, the road crossing. That's $1 million. That's a priority, and it's been funded, been approved?
The grant has been awarded, yes.
It's not going to be $1 million for that, Mike.
That's not tip money though, is it?
Unless that's
It is-
part
it is
of,
not tip money.
I know what it is, the sidewalk thing. I forgot about that. Never mind, getting rid of the Belgian block and making
Realigning
it.
it,
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I forgot.
But hooray for our new member, he just caught on to a point.
Sorry.
Because it's not a tip-eligible project, and I put that up there from informational purposes, but it's probably not appropriate to have that because it's not a tip project.
Right.
So I should probably delete that from the notice.
Okay, so then we go down, and for the subsequent years, no project program, but there's $500,000 asked
Because
for?
that's the money that we are by right.
Target.
Yeah, it's our target.
Okay, but then you get down to the bottom and it says to be determined. So if I'm looking at this, I'm saying, well, wait a minute, you say there's no program identified, but you got a whole bunch of programs down here.
Look at the cost.
Who's
He mean-
deciding what?
I think,
So,
Derek, yes, go ahead.
yeah.
Help us out.
All I wanted to say is that you are looking at page 132,
Yeah,
correct?
yes.
The tip doesn't actually begin, or the draft tip, excuse me, until page 134. That's what would be submitted for public review and comment. The 45-page document that digs more into the weeds and answers some of the questions that you can't decipher just from looking at page 132. That's A. B, in terms of to be determined projects, or the fiscal year that you see at the bottom of 132, that just means that they're in your universe of projects that you would like to fund or program funds for if federal funds become available. If you're able to see a project, advanced construction, a project that's $1 million over 2 years, and it's ready with design by say 21 and 22, then in next year's tip, if when you've worked with the district, MassDOT District 5 office, your District 5, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, if you've worked with MassDOT District 5 office on getting a project ready and in a budget that you can use your funding, your regional funding target for, then in next year's tip, you can recommend that. Now, over this comment period, that's a new development that the select board approved the design on a bike project. That's newer than when this tip was being developed. That's the kind of thing that a public comment could be made if you wanted to include it in this tip and were able to demonstrate project readiness and were able to get the green light from the project manager of that and from MassDOT, then that's something that could potentially in the next 3 weeks be added for inclusion if it hits every one of those check marks. Otherwise, I don't see a problem with what's been presented yet. I still have to review the entire 45-plus page TID document, but I hope that answers some of the questions. Don't harp exclusively on pages 132 and 133.
So it's the entire 45-page document that's going out for public comment?
Correct. Review and comment.
Okay. Let me try to get at what I'm trying to get at. And maybe it isn't specifically the tip, but, and I think
system.
we're coming around to this discussion that's later on.
Yeah.
So, and this is where I think we need to I need to understand what the relationships are. So for instance, projects can be funded by the town without an override.
Atomic bond.
Without a bond. Projects can be paid for by the town with a bond, in which case it may need voter override if it's going to be significant enough and change the tax rate. Or it could be funded by a federal program, correct? So we've got 3 ways to fund.
state.
Or for the state program too.
State, okay. So what I'm trying to get at is, who's deciding what the priority is for those projects and whether they're going to be a priority, number one. Number two, is there going to be a priority funded by the town without going to bond, with going to bond, or try to get federal funds?
Nantucket determines the priority. Okay?
Yeah.
And if after that step has been taken, the next part of the review is what's eligible for which funding pool that you outlined.
Yep.
Because Nantucket has a 3C contract, planning contract, and is thus eligible for these federal dollars, there are certain strings attached to federal dollars that need to be met in order for a project to receive federal funding.
Okay.
So if that's what we mean when we say project readiness.
Yeah, yeah.
Something that you may fund municipally may not require the same red tape, so to speak, that a federally funded project requires.
Yep.
And Mike, you can add any more to that.
Mike, explain how
I hope
Hummock
that
Pond
answers your
got done.
question a little.
Explain how Hummock Pond got done. We still had to pay for the engineering and all the stuff.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, Hummock Pond was approved at the ballot, but it did receive some private funds.
Yeah.
So that could be built.
Yeah, but I'm trying to say to you is the red tape part. I don't like
Yeah,
to say that.
and
but
we did that
Derek
locally.
said it, so I can say it now.
Yeah.
The gobbledygook stuff.
Yeah.
You can get. You're not getting around like environmental review and all that kind of thing. Wetlands and the shad bush that they thought they found. Remember that on Butler Road.
Yeah.
But it gets by some of this other stuff. This readiness thing isn't about shovel ready. It's technical ready. It's all the criteria that we have to do to get that funding versus just privately doing it.
Correct.
Like Old South Bike Path, I don't know if you remember, we finished it ourselves. Remember that? We said, we got to finish it, and we just wrote a check and made the bike path complete, to Macy's Lane, or to Nobody Farm, which we didn't do. It wasn't ever finished.
Yeah.
So I think that's the kind of the confusion
Yeah.
that Fritz is trying to unravel here, which is part of
Yeah.
why we talked about putting these things on the agenda for the other stuff, is what does the public think we're doing
Yeah.
or not doing?
Exactly.
And saying no and yes and yes and no. Is it because of, I don't think it's this process. I honestly don't. I think if you, Mike, and Derek, I'm going to say somebody else's name that you don't know who it is, but if Brian Turbot could explain this process, the money part, the way he explained some stuff last night, if you watched the meeting, and what he did explain at town meeting that he was asked to explain, it would help the public more. That's why it passes town meeting, because he's there explaining, but he's not standing there when you go take your piece of paper into the voting thing with the pencil.
Yeah. He's not allowed to be.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's why it passes town meeting overwhelming, because there's somebody there telling the audience where the money's coming from, how much is this costing the
Yeah.
seasonal resident, and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So this process has always been extremely difficult to follow. This isn't new. Like, I thought we were tipping the Orange Street. Even me. I mean, I get lost in some of this stuff myself, but I understand it enough to know that you almost have to trust it like a doctor with this. It's so complicated.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean?
That's what
I just
Mike
don't know
said.
what to say about it. I feel bad. I mean, the other guy that Derek replaced was the same discussion.
Yeah.
What was his name? Whatever his name was.
Brian is still there. He's head of.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I mean, we got to try to have a Cliff Note way of explaining the tip to the members, so that they can talk. I mean, stuff's on Facebook. We didn't have Facebook when I got on this board. You know what I mean? Now we got people asking zillion. Look at these questions in here. These answers. Most of them look like Facebook stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure. And I think Fritz's question of prioritization was well answered by Derek on that. Nantucket determines what the priorities are. I think it can get very complicated if you try to say what is Nantucket on determining these things, because it's so many boards. You serve on one with project review committee, finance committee, town meetings, ballots. It's very complicated, but at the end of the day, the community does determine the priority through a very messy process.
I think a good way to do it, and I just, I don't mean to interrupt again, but
Sure.
private project, meaning town funded, versus this process. Just a simple way to explain the difference. I think that would help us,
Okay.
because it is hard.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? To understand, like if we build a bike path on flat ground with tip money versus building a bike path on flat ground with our money, I don't mean to say it like that, but you know what I mean, town-funded money, what's the difference in the process? I think that's a good answer to that.
All right.
May I make a suggestion? And for my benefit, I think for the public benefit, for my benefit, so I can explain it to somebody who asks me a question and I
It's hard.
say I don't know the answer. If we could take, and I'm not suggesting we do it right now, but take some time at a meeting or allocate some time to take a look at what I will call the visible projects that have been talked about,
Yeah.
thought about, voted up, voted down, different ways. And we know what those are. There are probably 10, maybe 10 projects. And whether they're bundled together or not. So you can talk about the sidewalk program, I mean, the sidewalk that was a part of the Bartlett, I mean, a part of the.
Yeah, nobody,
you know, yeah, that.
fairgrounds.
You know, so you've got a
Yeah.
sidewalk project, and we've got a roundabout project, and you've got other types of things. And if we could just go down that list and say, where are we today by what's been approved either at town meeting, approved to go out for bonding? In other words, where are we on the project? How is it being paid for, or can it be paid for based upon what the voters have said, right? Because if they say, no, we're not going to authorize you to go out and borrow $5 million to do this, then the question is, are we then, who decides then whether, well, maybe what we'll do is we'll go and look for state or federal funds to do that project, versus, are we going to do this project? And in what year and in what priority? And I think that's a little bit, I think, of what we were kind of getting
it is.
toward the
Yeah.
end, is
Yeah.
where are we today after 3 years of, in some of these projects, of them coming to the voters, coming to town meeting, different results, different combinations of programs. What is the public telling us, and what are we, at least as this committee, I mean, and I understand the select board's got responsibilities, but what are we as a commission hearing, and what position are we gonna take about what we think we ought to be doing going forward?
Yeah.
That's where I am.
Yeah, I mean, David, did you, I mean, you had your
just,
hand up,
it
I'm
might be a
sorry.
foolish question. No. So the TIP's basically part of a funding package. So
T21.
that
Well,
so that
Fast Act, but, yeah.
$524,000 could go to help fund a project. It's not necessarily for one project.
correct.
Okay.
But it has to meet that
Criteria.
project,
Yeah,
yeah.
it has to meet.
It's like a
has to
different.
check all
pro-
the boxes before it can be
It's
included.
gotta be approved by
Yeah,
DOT.
no, I
Yeah.
get it.
And the only reason, Mike, I bring up like Cliff versus Hummock, because Cliff, remember, the first thing was like, they said, see you later, because it was like 2 something, or what, I can't remember what the price came in at.
Yeah.
And we broke it up into, I don't know how we did it, but I know we used more than 1 year to build that.
Yeah.
I just didn't know how we did it, but I knew that that was part of it.
Yeah.
And that was a big struggle, but we did it, right? Through this process. I thought, and since then, we've had the Orange Street, I guess that was actually phase 2, wasn't it? I was wrong about that, right?
Orange
Isn't
Street.
2 what we already did, and 1 hasn't been done, and 3 hasn't been done, right? I get confused. I thought that was 2 and through the railroad bed.
I wouldn't try to label them that way. Just,
Oh.
I would call it the railroad right of way is done.
Okay.
The railroad causeway, Goose Pond Lane path is done.
I thought
Orange
we
Street
were
is the
gonna
next one.
use TIP for whatever the next thing was, and then we switched to Bartlett because we got the land acquisition pieces in place,
Correct.
correct? And that's why that wasn't at town meeting on the ballot, because that's still sort of floating around as a TIP future thing, correct?
And it had been previously acted upon by 4 previous town meetings.
Okay,
For real estate acquisitions, design money allocations, that project had already been through town meeting a
Yeah.
number of different times
Okay.
and been supported.
and do we ever have, I don't mean to interrupt again, but did we ever have the high school one in the TIP, or no? I can't remember that. We never have, right?
I don't think Four Corners has
Okay.
ever been in a position to be programmed
Okay.
into the tip now.
Because we're talking about the TIP, and we haven't used TIP. How much do we have in the pot right now?
Kitty, what's that kitty?
That's the next question that hasn't been asked yet. Do we have like a pot of money, because we haven't had a ready project? And that goes
No,
back
no, no, no,
to
no,
Judith saying, give it to Paula
If
for
I
some
could-
buses.
If I could,
I don't know.
I don't want to correct you, Mr. Chairman, but I think you need to be corrected. We do have, a number of different projects that have been funded through the TIP in recent years.
Yeah.
And the whole point of listing the ongoing projects, the point of that was to show that we are spending a lot
Yeah,
of federal funds
okay.
well above what we have as a target.
So, okay, I'm just trying to sort of get us back to normal and say, something that makes sense here, because it is really hard to follow all this. Like the milestone stuff is all federal money or state money. That isn't even TIP or private, correct? That's almost a separate entire,
Because it is federal, it is TIP.
okay. But it's not part of our TIP.
We did program milestone road improvements into last year's TIP, not this current year's TIP.
Okay.
So it's an ongoing project that we funded with last year's funding.
Oh, I thought that was just like a state separate thing because it's a state road.
Well, it's federal and state funded, but yes, we did include, that was a TIP project, yes.
Okay.
But we did plenty of projects that aren't TIP funded. They get done, sidewalks downtown are done
Yeah.
with
No,
local
that's all
funds.
regular money.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But that's not well, it's controversial how we're doing it. But it's not controversial to write that check. It hasn't been yet, anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
To move this
Okay.
forward, I don't want to
Yeah.
hold up. So what we would do is to put this document, which is the long document, not, in other words, we're focusing on one page of numbers,
Not to
Yeah.
draft the whole
and to
thing.
put the draft document out for public comment,
Yep.
which we may, and then we would come back, but we still have the opportunity, in other words, once I review all of this, if there are issues in it, before we adopt it, we have the opportunity to talk about changes or whatever. Is that correct?
Priorities
At
at
the-
the next meeting.
At the May
At the
20th
next-
meeting,
okay.
and I would hope if there's questions to clarify that we could,
Move things up and down
Yeah,
that list,
okay.
if we change our mind.
So,
and I'm always at my office, I can answer email. That's, we
No, I
don't have to do the Q&A at the meeting. We can do it
Yes,
outside.
Judith. Sorry.
Just Derek, if you're still there, thank you for all your help tonight. You said it would be possible in the next 3 weeks to be looking at the bike path possibility. Did I understand that correctly?
I was giving an example. I mean, I don't know any details about what the selectmen approved this week. I just heard something mentioned at the meeting. But if progress has changed since this tip was developed on a project, and if the project cost was something reasonable that you could either fulfill your funding target for 1 year, or if it exceeds the funding target, how many years would it take? If it's all the checks on the list with the district office and with the project manager for that prospective project that they think it would be ready to fund in the year you want to program it for, then it's something that we could theoretically include into the tip.
I would
throwing that as an example
just,
because
if it were possible for you and Mike to explore that
Yeah.
between now and the next time, Mike, do you think that's,
I'll just cut Derek off and say no, that's probably not going to be a good candidate project because the funding just got it.
Unlikely is the word, but it's why we have a review period and a comment period in case
Yeah.
there's anything we missed.
Just to explain the answer, Derek, the funding was just authorized at town meeting. We don't have any engineering services that have been executed yet. We are extremely early in the process, so we wouldn't be able to meet the prerequisites for programming it into the tip.
just,
that answers that
again, well, not quite for me, I'm sorry. How about for 2021, 2022? I understand that you're not ready for 2020, but
Correct.
isn't this forecasting where things are going to go beyond the immediate year?
The DOT policy has been, at least for my work with the tip, is that preliminary design needs to be at least under review or approved by DOT, 25% design, to program that project into an out year of the tip. Because it's so early, and quite honestly, we haven't submitted a project initiation form for the state yet. For this project, I don't believe we would be allowed to put it into the tip because it's so early. If we,
That's correct. Correct.
if we execute an engineering contract, which probably will happen by June, if the design, preliminary design is finished by the following June, which will probably be this time next year, we'll probably be talking about programming that project into the tip. But we have to wait that time in order to meet all the prerequisites, which it's just way too early right now to say we have.
Judith, are you okay now? I mean,
It's
this
just,
is a-
I really
know.
think it would be helpful to have some kind of plain English diagram that the public could understand. I think some of the whiplash we've been getting about projects coming back to town meeting or on the ballot has to do with people thinking we've said no once, but not being quite sure. Are you saying no to source of funding? Are you saying no to what? And who's made what decision and when was the decision made? And if we've spent, 40 minutes trying to grapple with this, and this is something we've been working on for quite some time, I don't know how the public can possibly understand it.
well, the public isn't,
They're being asked to comment though, right?
yeah, I know. The tip part, though, is separate from all that. I think they think where the tip is them. I don't think the tip you know what I mean? I look at the tip as, how do we get our hands on this 500,000? So we don't spend it, but
Yeah.
public doesn't really know that. Their issue is, I think, is what a lot of money means. You know what I mean, to them? But then the school gets 46 million for a new school without even calling the article. It's a complicated place we live in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We spend zillions without even talking about it. And we don't want to spend 2 million to do
Yeah.
something. It's just
Yeah.
how we are.
Reduce our expectations instead of going for 4 million.
I think we need to talk
split it
about-
into phases.
I
and
think we
say-
need, that's what Fritz just brought up. I think we need to talk about that at the end. John, that's why I put these on with Mike. Breaking it up, we talk about that at Capitol. Some of this is the way that articles are drafted with multiple things in it. I mean, I'm curious to know if Newtown Road and Old South to Amelia would have passed if it was one article. I think that's what Fritz is saying.
Yeah.
But that little mutt path from my favorite thing, the little deal that goes from Inky to Charlie Hughes's got pulled out like 3 times. You had it in there, and I think Andrew had it in there once. And it keeps getting, now it's in with another project,
Yeah.
with the one from Betta. Betta put it in, I don't even know if he asked them to. Did they just see it as all that right-of-way sitting there?
No, that was part of a public
Oh,
comment.
was it?
that was-
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
curious how that happened, because that was through
Because
them
people like you like that
showed up.
project, it was included in that
Okay,
project.
all right, well, I was just curious, so it just made me think of it. But, all right, so are we okay to put this on the 21? Is everybody, to put this on the,
21-day.
anyway, right? So we're gonna put these pages out.
45 pages.
So I'll entertain a motion then to put the, what is this now? The public review for the TIP for 2020 to 24.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Guys have it. Eleanor, are you all right over there? Thank you. Okay.
Just so I know, how does this actually get put out for comment?
That's another thing. We still use carrier pigeons and the clipboard downtown. How does this work,
The guy
Mike?
with
No,
the
I-
sandwich board walking up down Main Street.
Yeah.
Some of that stuff is archaic too, by the way.
Yeah, I don't believe either one of
When
those are
my
listed.
wife wants to read it, does she get it in the mail, or does she have to go online to find it? And who tells her that it's time to look
How
at it?
does it work? Because no one ever responds. So, Mike,
Yeah,
how does it
I don't
work?
think carrier pigeons or sandwich boards are in our public participation plan that's approved by this body, but the public participation plan does outline how we have to communicate this to the public.
Yeah,
The way we do
that's right.
it is by posting it on the town's website. We send out a blast through town notifications, email subscribers to town news. I have my own list of stakeholders that I keep.
That you
It's a
email
long
out.
list, and I email
Yeah.
those out.
Yeah.
We provide copies at the town building. We provide copies at the Athenaeum and at our office. So that's the limit of our distribution. We do not put ads in the newspaper. That was something that we had removed from our public participation plan some time ago, those notices in the newspaper.
Yeah, you'd have to have a separate edition.
Astronomical.
So we keep everything electronic,
Yeah, right.
the notifications, in order to try to reach as many people as we
Because-
can. But we rely a
Is there
lot
an
on
ad in
it.
the paper that just says, announcement?
We used to do that, but it's for certain things, isn't it, Mike? that we still do it or no?
Statutorily, there's no requirement for advertising
Okay.
in the newspaper, so we rely on the public outreach coordinator through the town to distribute
Okay.
this on the website and through the office locations that I had mentioned, having paper copies available, and through email through stakeholders.
Okay.
Fittingly, the tip itself outlines the public participation process in item 4, page 145. If you just want to see it all spelled out.
Derek's doing great tonight. I love this.
Did you get dinner yet tonight, Derek?
I,
No, there it is.
the
I
last,
had a Snickers.
Yeah, there you go.
okay. Mike, I wasn't
Yes.
trying to make fun about the carrier pigeon. I was thinking about the registered mail and all the complaints we get from the planning.
Yeah.
These registered things, I mean, that's like the 50s. I still feel an email on everyone's lot is the answer to that, but that's another discussion for another.
Okay, it does, the paragraph explains it.
So there you go, okay? All right,
Move on.
yes, the UPWP, that's always a sort of another confusion that you just say yes. So what do we got there, Mike? What page is that on?
And just for the minutes, we did get the authorization for the release of the 21-day public review, is that right?
Yes, we did that.
And we
We
did the-
voted
the
unanimous for
vote?
that,
Okay,
Mike.
good.
Yep.
Well, the same routine's needed for the UPWP. The
194.
UPWP stands for the Unified Planning Work Program,
Yeah.
and that's, starts on page 10,000 of the packet. No, it's 194 of the packet.
Yeah.
That's actually the notice for public review, and then the actual UPWP document starts on page 195. At previous meetings, we had talked about the table on page 203, which is basically a breakdown of the budget and tasks that would be undertaken. Just for the new member of the commission, the UPWP describes all transportation planning activities that happen within the upcoming fiscal year, and breaks down the time and the money that's allocated by the state to do those tasks. We do submit monthly reports to DOT explaining the progress on all these tasks.
And that's some of the stuff you see in the summer, Dave, with the little people around, the little wires.
No, I saw it.
The little posts.
On-demand
Yeah.
pickups and
Yeah.
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
But all the committee coordination, all the data that's collected, the planning studies that are done, and the capital improvement process is all the narrative of those tasks are in this document. This is again is a prerequisite for receiving federal funds for transportation projects locally. A 21-day public review is required for this document, as is required for the TIP, and the action that's requested is to authorize a 21-day public review of this FY20 UPWP.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for this? We've seen this before, the breakdown. So I'll accept the motion to authorize the public review for this as well.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, for that. Thank you, Derek, hanging in there with us. Okay. Can you explain this next one, Mike, a little bit?
Sure. On page 223, there is a draft, 224, a draft coordinated human services public transportation plan for the Nantucket region. This was approved 4 years ago. This is a simple update of the coordinated plan. What this plan essentially is a long-range planning document specifically for the elderly and
Yes.
disabled,
Yep.
and what transportation needs are needed by that population
remember
group.
this.
It's meant to be extremely specific to that demographic, and as was done 4 years ago, there's coordination that's necessary with the commissions on disability, council on aging, health and human services, and those stakeholders. And so this is ongoing coordination that's happening. I have met with the council on aging. I'll be back at their June meeting to review this plan. There's no action that's being asked for tonight on this plan. I just want to introduce it to you and show you that the identified needs are that weekend and evening demand response service. This is the Your Island Ride. Paula's stayed here, so please jump in. She's absolutely been helping throughout the development of this plan in coordination with these committees. But the Your Island Ride service, there's a need for weekend and evening coverage of that service. Replacement of demand response vehicles. The replacement of the vehicles, again, speaks to having the transit access management plan, having good
So
vehicles
that's
on
tied
the
into
road.
this as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
So having those, the best vehicles possible on the road. And then the implement accessible connections between bus stops and origins and destinations. That's a need that's currently ongoing. Even on
Yeah.
Milestone Road, you see that there are bus
Yeah.
pull-offs being constructed with accessible crossings being developed. That's to help address this need.
So this is all tied in, Paula, to you, to some degree. This is good. I knew that, but I don't remember seeing it exactly like this before, but this is good. Can I just ask a question, Mike, before Fritz catches this? The census again. You know, I mean,
Thank
it's
you.
funny to look at that 2020 because we know that that's inaccurate. And I know that this has been brought up before, the data platform and its relevance. I can't remember what the answer was, but I'm assuming it's not relevant to the legal, you know, what our population is versus what we kind of know it is.
It's the base number. It's the
Yeah.
minimum amount of people on the island would be the year-round voting population or the year-round
Yeah.
resident. What the data platform did was account for seasonal workers and that, and summer residents
Okay.
and other populations. So it's the base numbers and it's the best information that we have so far for this type of very detailed part of it for age and disability. It's the best information we have for understanding what those numbers are and where these populations are located. But as far as addressing the needs, we definitely depend heavily on like these other committees that deal with those stakeholder groups,
Yeah.
the Council on Aging, Commission on Disability, and the rest.
And I think if I can just, because I think, Matt, what you're trying to remember is when we're dealing with the federal documents,
Yep.
everyone that's like us has to report the same type of documents. and
Yeah, you
it's
can't just say, well, we're
census-
different.
Census
I know.
is,
Yeah.
I mean, Nantucket has its issue with the population that we
Yeah.
always hear about, but you have to be uniform
Yep.
across the board in what data is used.
Okay. All right.
So just to go over the schedule one more time, Mr. Chairman, this is just to introduce the plan. At the next meeting on May 20th, I'll ask you to release this for another 21-day public review. During that review, I'll finalize my coordination with all these other stakeholder agencies. And then at the June 17th meeting, I believe it is, you'll be asked to approve this document.
Yep. Okay.
So no action's needed.
No action on this.
No
Okay.
action on this, but
Okay.
it will be at the next
Do you mind
meeting.
a question?
Yes, go ahead, Judith.
So, how frequently is this updated?
Every 4 years.
Every 4 years?
Correct. It does mirror the transportation plan development.
So if, for example, a senior center were relocated or a new one established or something like that, that might make a difference on some of the content about what kinds of services or where they run, but that's not on the immediate horizon, but we'd be coming back to that. It's not like a 10-year interval, it's shorter than that if it's 4.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so no action. Okay, so the next item, if everyone's okay, the appointments. Can I just ask you a clarification, Mike? Well,
Super, super quick because we're
Oh,
going to have one member.
John's
No, we
gotta
do have
leave.
a quorum. I'm sorry. Yeah, you can leave. I'm sorry.
no, I just want everyone, because, John,
I
are you
really
all
want you to
set?
vote on this,
I am
John.
sorry,
Okay.
I apologize.
Okay, no. I forgot you told me that.
Early
Sorry.
notice of that.
Mike, what did we do with the appointments? Did we make them all 1 year?
Yes.
We did, that's
No,
what I
no,
thought. Didn't we?
we appointed them all. They were not staggered. They were
That's right.
3-year appointments for,
Okay.
again, we're talking about bike
That's what I
pedestrian
meant.
advisory
There's no,
committee.
we got rid of the staggering thing because it was ridiculous, as I recall, trying to figure that out for this committee. And so we made it, everybody's got a 3-year term?
Correct.
Okay. Just want everyone to know that. David, especially you. This is the bike committee. We created the bike committee, what, 4 years ago? 5?
More than that.
Is
Yeah,
it more
was-
now? I can't
was
remember what
6
year it
years ago,
was.
yeah.
And we just sort of modified it because everybody's really interested in this and they sort of stay, and we didn't need to create another task for staff to try to figure that all out. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But I just couldn't remember exactly what we did. So thank you, Mike, for telling me. So what are you looking to do now? To advertise on the appointments? Because that's coming up. Well, we do the appointments for this.
Correct. If you could take action to authorize staff to advertise for these positions, we will have at the June 17th meeting,
Okay.
a vetting
Yeah.
of whoever applies for
Yeah.
that committee.
Okay.
I'll make a motion for staff to
Yes.
proceed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Perfect. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for that. So the next things was just the basic conversation we've already sort of had a little bit. I thought we'd put this on the agenda since it just ended, and, you know, it's a good time to bring it up, although it's getting late, but I think we should at least skim over it a little. Andrew, and chime in, please, if you feel necessary. I just, you know, we're at the moment on the Nantucket, I think it's pretty obvious that we're in sort of this yes, no, no, yes, we need, we don't. We went through this in the 90s. We had widening, in fact, I asked Mike some questions the other day for everyone to know. We passed an article, and was this before the country overlay, Andrew, or before it was modified, the Christine's article? No turning lanes and turning lanes. And it's still in effect, but what's the border on it?
It's within the town overlay districts, in the country overlay district, turning lanes are prohibited unless approved by town meeting.
And Macy's Lane in Old South is not outside.
It's in the town overlay,
It's in
not the
town.
country.
Because that got brought up when we got that as a condition for the Richmond project, to them to put that in. And I had forgotten about that article. That was in, I don't know what year, it was in the 90s, I know that. The roundabout issue, I think, is the number one survey question that we need to do.
Okay.
We got a lot of people from Europe who live on Nantucket now. And one of them's the head of a Facebook page. And if we don't think roundabouts work, then we need to have some kind of either, I don't know what we need to do, public hearings.
Anyone who doesn't understand it, give them a ticket to
So,
England.
I mean,
Let them drive around.
they're perfect. They were made for Nantucket before we ever knew what it was. So I think we should talk about some kind of survey that has the right kind of questions. And Derek's probably saying, wow, we're doing them all over the state. They're in Maine. I was just up in New Hampshire. We go to North Conway. There's 3 right next to each other. I mean, so we hear that here, yeah, but they're not roundabouts. The rotary is not a roundabout. It's a stop sign with a circle. That's what that is. So I think that, and then how we put these articles on is key. Fritz just brought that up. I don't want to put a roundabout in with something everybody wants just to get the roundabout. But I don't, I want to be honest with it. I don't think that that's what's happening. I think it's just the way the warrant gets printed and how these mechanisms, the legal issues with this stuff. I think that that's why this is happening. So I think we need to talk about that as far as, anyone have any points? I mean, so go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I just think it's, granted,
Doesn't
I
make
don't
more
have the
people
knowledge you guys have, but I mean, I think it's how you're selling it, and how you're packaging it is what it comes down to. I think that even though it was a small margin for the Rotary out here, if you had packaged just those roadway improvements, those would have gone through, I think.
Which ones? Excuse me.
The Newtown Road.
Oh, the sidewalk.
Without the Rotary, those would have gone through. And so it's about how we package it, and I think that it also is how we sell it as far as funding.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, that's big.
how are
That's
we
big.
how are we funding these things?
Yeah.
It's not all going to go on your tax rolls, but we're looking at it from here, here, and here, and be transparent about that. I think would go a long way to give people clarity. And personally, I'm not convinced on the rotaries myself, but I think that people need to understand that we're not selling it to them as a solution to the traffic problem, because it's not. But we're selling it as cleaning up intersections and helping traffic at a certain level move smoothly, instead of
That's true.
trying to sell it as a fix-all.
Well, I mean, it's a percentage. It's like when Mike has his FD
Level of service
stuff,
ratings,
levels
yeah.
of service. I mean, it's just how it gets done, but it's the same point. When we did the post office project, and I always bring that up because that's 12 years old now, that roundabout. And that's a real roundabout. And I remember when I bring this up, it's an awful situation. We tried to fix Milestone before that roundabout was built. And the town wasn't ready for it. And Mike had a guy here that basically had to leave with a bag over his head because it was so bad, the opposition to fixing the Milestone Rotary.
Putting
Now,
a stop sign out and adding a lane.
well, in angling it, it has to be redone. But now we have people saying on some of these surveys, why don't we fix Milestone first? They don't remember that they didn't want to fix it. It's sort of like First Way.
Well, they probably weren't
They
living
didn't-
here then. They
Nobody,
all-
well, that's true too.
They moved
Nobody
here and
wanted to
suddenly
fix
they're
First
experts.
Way 15 years ago. And about 5 years ago, all of a sudden, everybody was wondering why we weren't fixing it. Same basic thing. This is sort of a Nantucket cultural issue, David, as well. But the financing, now, wasn't there something on the warrant, Andrew, that broke that down? Didn't Brian have
He did.
it's how much it was gonna cost the seasonal resident versus cost the year-round resident, versus the seasonal resident. And just for your information, it's between 85 and 88% they pay compared to us.
Yeah,
So
but
it's not
even-
much. It's just hard to sell that.
Or not sell it in what it's going to cost you on your taxes as much as sell it as the feds are giving us this, the state's giving us this,
Well-
and this is what we're putting in as a town.
That, and when Mike said earlier, we're proving something that we may get federal funding for is pretty difficult to.
Putting the cart before the
Yeah, I mean, I think the other part of
Well, to explain it, yeah.
of the financing is, and this, I talked to Brian about this a lot. What's coming off the books? That doesn't get talked about. We don't have our first car loan from high school, okay? I mean, stuff is coming off as much as it's coming on. It's not like we're adding, yes, we're adding sometimes, but there's a whole bunch of subtractions too. That's why our tax rate keeps kind of going down, other than the new assessments and new improvements. So it's a tough sell here. And I think a lot of it, I mean, if we were worried about our taxes, we didn't call the fire station, this one, and we didn't call the middle school, or the elementary school.
Intermediate, yeah.
Intermediate, I know, I keep forgetting. That was $60 million, never had a conversation. Nothing. But we argue over these minor things because I think it's more than money. I think it's a lot of times, I mean, when we tried to move the 1821 house, for free, by the way, it was a private resident that was gonna move that house, there were comments that were more vehicles will come here if we move the house. I mean, it's happening right now, we're told. Falmouth thinks there's more cars are gonna go through Falmouth because there's gonna be an operational third slip. No, that's to park a boat on the weekends. It's to fix another slip. It's just to make it better. It isn't making more people decide I'm gonna drive to the Vineyard today. It's just, that's a problem. The perception issue is massive here.
That's the whole problem.
But
So go ahead, Judith.
To your point, you mentioned survey.
Yeah.
It makes me think that it might well be useful to have some kind of a quick survey that would be, I think, in addition to possibly cost and who's paying the cost is also, I think pedestrian and bike safety
Yeah.
is of concern to some people.
It is.
I think
Yeah.
that it was really very good that DPW put in the plywood mock-up, but I think the way the Jersey barriers were so close, people
2
got
more feet
nervous
to the
about
right.
it. Well,
2 feet.
Well, we can thank him for insisting on putting those concrete barriers for not getting that passed.
People thought that.
I don't think
how
that-
it was gonna look. The
No,
people
but-
thought that was
No,
the size it was
you-
gonna be.
All I
I-
mean is that it's really, it would be worth teasing out, also to ask about the specific locations, because I think the ones where the schools have people concerned for different reasons maybe than some of the others. I don't know if there's some other way to do that, but I think we need to understand it.
Well, Mike, to Judith's point, okay, when that Beta guy, were you guys here for Beta? That Beta guy, what's his name? The guy from Beta.
Ken.
Beta. No, I'm saying it. It's
Ken.
beta.
Beta. Ken is awesome, okay?
Ken
And this-
Ho, yes.
he really did a good job explaining the way a roundabout works. And as far as the safety goes, because that is a big one, as far as the perception of safety, and I drove through the stop sign today, just so you know, I went right through it, and I could not believe it. But
You'll be getting a citation from the police department.
couldn't believe it.
It's on film
But
now.
it's the free-for-all, waving, flicking lights, anticipation of what the other person is going to do. That's what a four-way or three-way stop does. It isn't making it safer. It's making it actually more confusing and people having to look left, look right. If you're driving alone by yourself, and that's the reason for this milestone double line, Mike. When you're by yourself, you can't look to both directions at the same time. So that split second of looking this way and you miss something over here, and a roundabout gets you sort of in a kind of a peripheral, straight ahead a little bit to the right and left instead.
Yeah.
But that is hard to explain professionally. You know what I mean? And it has to be, I think what Judith is saying is if the survey had questions that were done like the guy Ken would ask, so that the public that's reading it is really answering and learning while they're answering these questions. Because from a layman person, it's really hard to write those questions correctly. Because selling a roundabout in America is different than selling it in Europe, because Europe's had them forever.
Yeah.
They don't even, if you ever took a roundabout out over there, they think you were crazy. They're all over the place. They call them traffic calming, they call them all kinds of things.
But
So
some of them just
they're
have a
new
pole in the
here.
middle of the street.
They're new here in the sense of how they work. It's not the same as a rotary.
There's also some other techniques. I was reading something from MIT or somewhere this morning's news clips about some high schoolers that designed a different way to paint crosswalks, so they were
Oh, the 3D.
multi-dimensional.
Yeah.
And
It's
that
like the Trump Doyle in the church, you know, it's
exactly.
three-dimensional, but it's
So, I
flat.
mean, there may be some things like that people would come up with, or that would make a difference to reassure them if you did that in addition to the rotary, so that they
The
feel-
the
When I saw
safe,
that, the first thing I
Wasn't
said,
that
someone's
interesting?
gonna see that and they're gonna jam on the brakes thinking it's a big boulder in the middle of the
Yeah.
street.
Well, but that's how your brain works, right?
Mike, when you talk, I was just over there and they have that, what do you call it? The safe,
An island.
yeah, what do you call that?
Refuge.
Refuge.
Yeah.
I can never think of all these words, man. They change every year. So that, the way Ken explained that at Milestone, as I recall, the crosswalk would be behind the entrance to the roundabout. You know, where the fork thing starts to angle your
It
vehicle.
goes through the splitter island, yeah. So
Yeah.
the splitter island is your refuge area. It's you have a 2-point crossing of the road. So,
Because people envision kids running through the circle, and it's not true. It's just what they think. You know what I mean? I have no issues with pedestrians at the roundabout at the post office. It seems to work. The only problem there is that curb's got to go back a little bit,
Yeah.
which you've already identified
Yeah.
on Hooper Farm. That's about the only thing wrong with it. So I just, bringing this stuff up, I mean, it's late and we've been kind of beating it up, but whatever anyone wants to comment, go ahead, have at it. ideas.
I think Dave brought up a good point. I think that about, gotta break them down into smaller pieces and get one approved and, what I see, people go to the town meeting and, oh, that's a great idea when it's explained to them. But then when they think it's gonna cost them out of their pocket,
Oh, yeah.
suddenly
Well,
they go the other way.
There's only 450 people saying yes at town meeting.
Yeah.
That's the
Right.
difference.
That's a
And
lot.
nobody's
It's a
watching
two
it on TV.
right.
Well, and no one's watching you. I mean, how many people were for it in town meeting that went and said no in the ballot box either? You know?
We don't know that.
Yeah, but I would.
I would say probably nobody
it,
did
yeah.
there. I think that there's just more people voting, at the ballot box saying no, percentage-wise. I mean, how many people voted this year, Andrew? 17?
3,200.
32, okay, just over 3,000, okay.
No, I found people I talked to like the Rotary.
I know, so I had a text from a kid, from a guy that said to me, you were right, and I didn't believe you.
I just think people.
And I don't even
spread
really
out
like
money
how they
over a
did it, but
longer
it
period of
did
time.
work
That
better than it
intersection,
does.
I'm not gonna deny it.
It worked better, it works better than it does right now.
You didn't need the plywood, man.
Get that plywood back there.
Put a little coat of yellow paint on it
Okay,
and put
make
it
it-
back.
Well, the other issue with the barriers is that pole to the right.
Right.
There was only a little bit further they could have went.
It was
to-
protecting the pole.
So.
No, I think it'll
Fitz,
happen in
you
the
had
future.
something, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, I agree completely that, I mean, I think with the voters, both at town meeting and at the ballot box, they see a big number
Yeah,
and they see something and it says, and other improvements. And they go, what other improvements? And I think it's the big number. So I agree. I
Well, it's
think
a
when you
series
put
of them.
Yeah,
It's a
the
series of
sidewalk
spending
project on
questions. It's
Newtown
back-to-back
Road-
Spending questions. that
Yeah,
are Just like,
it's money and money and money
Yeah,
and thing,
yeah.
and the reaction of why should that cost $5 million?
yeah.
It's true too.
And I think they just it's an education thing, completely separate and apart from whether you think rotaries or roundabouts are good or bad. And I've moved a little bit that I think in one or two of these places, I think it may work. Don't think it's going to work in other ones. Just give you an example. I think putting the plywood down out here on the intersection, I think helped.
I do too.
But I don't think most people actually believed that that's what the intersection was going to look like.
I don't think so either.
I think people knew there was gonna be a better product than that. We
Right.
already have one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We already have one.
Yeah.
The metal guy in the middle of it.
Because it was
metal
clear
guy.
The blue
that trucks
man.
couldn't get around that thing. So it's going to be bigger. And then they say,
It's gonna
well,
be
if
flatter,
it's going to
too,
be
than the-
bigger.
than the-
A better question
Mark.
is how many people drove that intersection after it was gone and said, shit, I should have voted yes. Excuse my French.
No, it's
When they're
true.
sitting there
It
at
is.
7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, not moving.
Well, the other thing about that intersection out here, I'm pointing this way, I'm sorry, is it has a turning lane. And it has since, time began.
Yeah.
But it's not striped. That's the only reason it works. If that didn't have that turning right, that would be like Bartlett Road.
That'd be a nightmare.
Because Bartlett doesn't have a turning lane.
Yeah.
It's just, you have to wait for every single car to turn right. Mike, I don't know if this is a question that you can answer. I just want to jump to one other thing on the Surfside roads.
Yep.
I know it isn't really Surfside to us, but that's what it's called.
Yeah.
I heard at Sutton's meeting the other night, they're gonna, because Ockerwa and Monahans, don't we have the easements, Andrew, for that now? To get it to 50 feet?
Yes.
So that we can put a bike path, just for David, the reason that the Boulevard is an 80-foot layout, crazy. It just was from the Braun subdivision. But the other two roads are 40. To get a separated bike path in 2-acre zoning, if you don't get the easements, you're crazy to not have it separated. The land is there. We just don't have it. So are we gonna be able to, that's probably gonna get done another way, and excluding Lovers and the little improvements in that little piece there. Lovers Lane is gonna get pulled out. I'm assuming that that's gonna get done. It sounded pretty positive the other night.
it's another example of packaging, I think. If
Well, that should,
through, if Lovers.
wasn't there.
It wasn't there.
Well, I'm not, I'm in agreement with what you're saying, but I'm not in agreement with separating it, because Rob did a great job. The water issues and the people on Lovers are all in favor of it now. A long time ago they weren't, when this got brought up, you know, what are we doing? But they are now, because of the water and because of the plan for the bike path is on the forest side.
Where it's gonna be down that strip, separated out.
It's gonna be separate.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that's a public road from 1898, county road, actually, isn't it? And,
That
So-
bike strip that we bike,
no.
the road itself.
The road, there's gonna be a bike path on Lovers Lane.
So it won't be separate, it won't be in that strip that runs, you know what I'm talking
mean-
about?
Oh!
The trail.
Yeah,
It's gonna be in an easement running parallel to it.
Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you meant by that.
It's sort of gotta be in that strip, Dave, and then it comes right through the Boy Scout camp.
yeah, it's on that trail.
On that
Yeah.
Boy Scout
That
side
trail.
of
It's
Lover's
like-
Lane.
It's not a single track, but
But the stuff that, the issues with drainage and grading, and it's just, he's got it figured out. I mean, they got a pretty good plan. We got a lot of infrastructure paid for by Shepley to get down to that next road in sewer and all kinds of different things they've done there. But to get the vehicles to spread out,
Well, I know why
those
they're
roads
doing it.
have to
Yeah, I know.
get done
Yeah.
at some point, because people will go the other direction. And having a bike path connector from Tom Never's area, theoretically, through Boulevard is the greatest thing ever. I mean, that's a great thing. So I think that there was some confusion with that, but anyway, that's just my,
There's
Who
one
you-
man in the audience that has a question.
yes, Andrew, sorry.
Well, you're on the capital, planning committee.
Yep.
The commission. And I mean, I think that this idea of putting too much into these is something that you all should look at.
Too much packaging.
It could be multi-year, it could be.
Oh, in 1 year, okay.
It could be a 3-year process where you're putting the money and living within the budgetary limits,
Mm-hmm.
you know, gradually, so the project is eventually ready. So I think, you know, there has been, a lot of this advice has come from financial consultants in other communities.
Okay, so that's another topic that I haven't even want to bring up, but
Well, I
if you
do-
want, I'll bring it up. I know exactly what happened with her.
Yeah.
I know.
The other thing to remember is that we did propose, this commission proposed, looking at the district improvement financing
Yeah.
methodology.
Okay.
Which would not have added, for example, for Old South Road, it would have used the new growth revenue in taxes to pay for some of the improvements without impacting every taxpayer. And unfortunately, that ended up getting sort of dismissed out of hand, and I think that was not a good, I mean, again, that came from our finance people
Yeah.
not wanting to look at alternatives.
Okay, so,
I agree with that.
no, he's right.
That's-
This
that's
is just
the
something I
winning- The
didn't,
winning play is gonna be doing a little project every year instead of putting 3 big projects
And
on for 1
clarity
year.
in funding.
And then
Yeah.
people don't say, oh, my tax bill is
Yeah.
gonna go up.
Yeah.
My tax bill can stay the same.
okay.
Mike and I also, you know, I think it's also what certainly helped defeat some of these projects is the Facebook and some of this
Yeah.
absolute.
Well, we
false-
closed Monomoy Road the day we voted. April 9th, Monomoy.
Nat, I think he's making a very important point that you're stepping
Yeah.
over.
No, I'm not stepping it over. I was bringing up what you said about Facebook.
Well, the point I wanted
Yeah.
to make is that at the planning conference, many public entities now have a much more active, you know,
Yeah,
publicity or, you know, Facebook monitors.
relations
deal
outfit,
with this. And it's something that, again, has been, I wish Matt Fee was here. 'cause
Yeah.
I'd like him to hear it, but, many communities that we talk to, you know, employ people now to actively sort of seek out when people are putting falsehoods and, you know, saying things. And I mean, I didn't see it, Mike, I think you
Yeah,
were aware of.
Yeah, other communities have a social media coordinator that basically monitors misinformation. Their sole livelihood is to push out educational information that the public needs to know. It's their job. Public, push out, but also monitor what's out there in the ether and correct it. And a lot of big communities, cities, towns, they have a person that they basically
you're right.
they tag the person who's doing the misinformation. They put the misinformation that they're stating, and then they put the correct information. And right now, we just don't have that. And there was some very, I think, harmful information that went out about specifically the Old South Road and how that project is already funded. Is just, do you want your taxes to go up to pay for it? And that was just not true.
No, I know, that's from Nantucket around. I mean, we had to hire someone steamship. It was brutal. And this guy is all over it, responds to things that aren't accurate. I mean, you can have an opinion, but you can't have your own facts. Two different things. And that's what they're talking about. And we talked to Libby about this. This is something that's going to have to get done because we're hiring some people for some peculiar job titles. I think this one would be the number one, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's true. So the thing about what Andrew just said about bond counsel, so this is, okay. So when other communities, David, and I'm saying it to him because you know this already, and you know this already, that lady from Franklin County that was here, when was that? 4 months ago? When we were sitting here? That lady was a great example of what bond counsel thinks like. They're like, you guys don't have any problems here. We think we have problems. Everyone else thinks we have none. Okay? And when they look at that 336, 1,000, they say, you got plenty of borrowing capacity. That's what Cinder thinks from the bond counsel lady, right? So when you're dealing with, and we have new people, like DPW director comes from another place, they start figuring out how money is so easy here. I mean, it's flying out of the atmosphere. And I'm not talking about tax money. I'm talking about philanthropy and the free stuff, let alone the taxes. So it's kind of like they get like sort of like on easy street. But I understand it as a local, like, yes, but but the public doesn't think that way. Even though it's true, they don't think that way. So when we go to town meeting and when we go to the ballot box, we're voting to spend other people's money that can't vote.
Well, there were a lot of big capital projects total. And
I know.
It's like.
Well, that's what Andrew's saying. Yeah. But I'm just talking about what he mentioned before about why we don't unbundle it or why we don't this, because we have plenty, we just pay for it. And when Andrew was talking about what's the district district improvement financing, what that was going to be able to do, and we've pretty much lost that now because it had to be for Richmond, and it has to be a big project where you take the taxes from that growth and a percentage of it comes out of that new growth and pays down the bond for X is basically how it works.
Right.
And other places, other communities like it because they don't have any growth. So, that new mall, they get to pay the taxes for something that they had to build, that we had to pay for.
The flip side of it is you don't have that revenue to use for other things like schools or whatever.
But this is where we get into what bond counsel said. We got so much money, it doesn't affect it. So it was going in two directions. She was saying, we got plenty of money.
Well,
and
she's not paying it.
No,
You're paying her.
I know, but the seasonal resident is paying
lots of money.
She sees the formula as a gift. We're seeing it as, I don't know.
Well, the community doesn't
a perception
understand it,
issue.
though, so for them, it doesn't, it works against
A
us.
person from away that comes here and sees this, sees it in an hour. We spend a lifetime and don't understand it. It's kind of scary. So, but I do think we have to try to address it. This conversation isn't going to fix it. We do have to do something with surveys. I think we have to change the way we put the articles on,
Well,
for sure.
The other thing, in my experience, there can be capital campaigns to do a whole set of projects. Like if the flip side of breaking it down to smaller would be traffic improvements. Here's the plan that you show the pieces are connected, or here's the bike
mentioned it
improvements,
to
we're gonna do all the bike improvements to get it done at once, and it's all connected, there's a reason for that. And do it at a time when there isn't a town pier, there isn't another fire station component, there isn't a school, so that,
Oh,
you see
yeah.
what I mean?
I
So
thi-
if it's conceptual and if it's connected, that's why I think people would support a school, because they know what that is. If it were all the bike paths at once, then you'd see how that kind of comes
Yeah,
together.
I think that's a good point. That's got brought up before, but also then you have you can only do so much in a year. Like you're seeing that with the grinding up of the sewer roads.
Right.
They grind them up 2 weeks ago and just pave them now. That's just because. Like there's no, Garrity couldn't get here with the grinder only this week, but Victor couldn't do it because
Yeah.
they didn't, it wasn't anyone's fault. It's Nantucket's system of how things work. You only do so much in a year. So maybe we should take what Judith is saying, take what Nantucket allows, and Andrew's saying we should maybe spread it out a little bit. I think part of the reason so much is on this because we haven't passed anything in so long. There's a lot of, it's piling up a little bit
Well, the
too, you know what I'm
other thing
saying?
that really struck me in town meeting was the fellow from Tom Nevers who talked about why the.
Why this hasn't gotten done yet?
That had been
Well,
approved for like
that's-
5 years prior.
That's
and-
because of there's a
Right.
couple reasons for that.
Right, but I think the public would like to know that if you, I mean, I think we need a multi-year spreadsheet, like.
Oh,
here's-
separate,
here's-
bikes versus,
Well, or
roads.
here's what's been approved and here's the status, because if people think that they approve something and they don't know if the money's actually going to be spent or when it's going to be spent, then.
Mike,
there's
that's a good
There's
point.
a disconnection about.
She's saying.
Yeah, I don't think you have any problem with bicycle paths,
yeah,
sidewalks, any of that. It's when the controversial
right, road,
items are the roundabouts.
Yep.
And some more than others. And when you appear to be packaging
Yeah.
other stuff
Yeah.
in to make it pass, people just say no. And I think that's what they're objecting to. Maybe the best thing to do, and have a list of items, projects.
yeah.
20 projects.
Mike, do you
And in
think
the
that
survey,
you could,
prioritize what's most important to you. and
do you think
see
it's
where they come out.
possible to, like, the Orange Street bike path? I saw National Grid over there the other day doing something with a pole. Are we getting, I'm just saying, I don't mean to change the topic, but it fits into what you said. The readiness of that section, did we make an arrangement with Marine Lumber to do any of that? Move those poles? Or no? Because I saw him doing
No,
something. the other day.
like we said earlier in the meeting, that process hasn't even started yet.
Okay.
The money
All right.
isn't available till June
Okay.
1st, or July 1st. So
Okay.
that's if there's utility. gas,
So
then
in
it's
other
separate.
words, okay, so then you're answering, all right, so if we said, Mike, where are we at with, lobster trap to
Goose Pond?
whatever,
Washington
wherever we're
Street
going,
extension.
wherever it's ending, East Creek or further.
Oh, the in-town bike path.
Yeah.
Okay.
So where are we with the in-town bike path? I'm sorry, I thought you figured that out.
No lobster trap. It takes a second.
Washington Street, right, to Otison's, right? What are we doing? Where are we?
Well, the first phase,
'Cause
as
I
you know,
don't know
was
where we are,
done a couple
actually.
years ago,
No, I know
100
that.
years after the railroad was abandoned
Yeah.
and picked up. So that was a good accomplishment. Phase 2 is the Orange Street section, which just got approved by town meeting recently, and
Yeah.
that we should have an engineering proposal from VHB within the next month or so.
Okay.
So that'll start. The Washington Street section, I think that's very unclear right now.
Depends on how much more land acquisition we get with the land bank, right, Andrew?
Yeah, the long-term plan is
Waterside.
once those houses on the harbor side are moved out, and there is a long-term plan to do that.
Okay.
That's where the bike path will go, completely off the road.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Can I
it's,
ask one question though?
Yeah.
Go right along the creek, Andrew?
On the section, basically from Francis Street to
Commercial.
just shy
Lobster
of
trap.
Commercial.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest houses is Walter Glowacki's former house in there, and that has to be moved. I think that has 3 years left on it, so. So that's coming out of there, and then the land bank has got right of first refusal, I think, for at least 2 properties on there, which, again, those will go away, and I think that leaves 3 that they would acquire.
And the good thing with Walter's house, when they grab that, he's got a King's Grant deed, just like the boat basin has, so that, and just like the town pier, so he can go, town can build another pier all the way out into the water.
Yeah.
The old difference with King's
That's good.
Grant deeds is they went out into the water instead of stopping at the high water mark. That's why the boat basin was built the way it is, because that was a King's Grant deed. That's why the town pier bought up Linda Loring's property there, because she had a King's Grant deed that went all the way out into the water.
Learn something every day. Go ahead, Andrew.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
So the roundabouts, I've heard, some people like them, some people don't. But we have always gone under the assumption that nobody wants traffic lights here. Is
Right.
that still?
Oh, you're gonna have your mouth washed out with soap tonight.
It never happened.
I just want to know if the rest.
It's
of
not even the right thing. Even if it was the right thing, it's not the right thing
I'd
here.
just like to hear it, because that's the assumption, we've been working under the assumption no traffic.
This is a good point. I didn't actually think of
It's
saying
in
that.
the charter, isn't it?
Andrew's saying,
Pretty
basically,
basic.
it's like the McDonald's, we're never gonna pave Main Street, we're never gonna have traffic lights, the never gonna happen list. In planning staff has been under the impression that the town would never support traffic lights as another, as an alternative to a four-way stop. So,
And that's what's led us to.
the roundabout is the alternative to that. There isn't anything else to do, really, except nothing.
Well, cloverleaf intersections, but who's going to be able to overpass?
Oh, okay. So,
Yeah, there's a lot that you can't do.
Do you want that question on?
I think that should be on the survey
Oh, I
too,
think
talking
that'd be a good
about,
survey question.
huh?
I think that'd be a good
Yeah.
survey question.
The other thing is, traffic lights don't work in the middle of the night. You gotta stop for nothing. That's another issue, is we have an up and a down
Yeah, but
flow of
you
traffic.
Well, you can
No,
have
I
them
know.
go into,
Right?
yeah.
I was gonna get to that. Now you gotta have
Function
now you're gonna have to have the traffic light coordinator position. You know what I mean? There's gonna be all this new stuff that doesn't work here. You don't need to have that.
I think the
People are used to them.
technology's
I've
not
Seen a traffic
quite-
People
light
do
when
leave
it's
the
well
island.
inside.
Timing of the lights, all
Well,
that stuff.
If you do that gets you
Lower them.
potential to smooth the traffic
No,
flow. So
I know, but you know what I mean, Judith. It isn't.
It's a ripple effect.
We don't want what we want what we don't want, and we don't want what we want. It's just the way we are. I mean, we have this problem. It's everywhere.
That's
It's,
why we live on an island. So.
well, for 3 months a year we're an island. I can tell you that. So we're pretty much an island on a strike too. But Mike, I mean, I think that's. We should talk about that in the survey whenever this.
Let me ask you a question. If you could have one roundabout out of
Would
the
you want it?
four,
High school.
which one would you want?
High school. Not even a question. Prospects?
We actually did ask that question.
Yeah. Not even a question, because for a zillion
Except for
reasons.
Linda Williams.
Yeah.
But look at, she's not alone. Okay? But that intersection is without question the worst. First of all, you have only one way to get to Nantucket. We got the dump in Nantucket, which I'm still gonna continue until the day I die. I'm gonna talk about moving the dump to the airport. And, because it's the right thing. And Andy Lewis would agree with me. And we drive semis on Prospect Street and Quaker Road, like we want to. Why? Because that's just what we do. But at the same time, that intersection is,
Crazy.
you can't fix that. Andrew, to his credit, working with the hospital, and at the time it wasn't the same people, getting this 40-foot road and agreeing to moving things around, to realign things and make it so we can actually fit the roundabout in, is huge. Again, the public, it's just like the Bartlett Road, getting the Poets Corner land, getting Gail Charetz's house. It's not, public doesn't know that, but it's true. And there's a lot of work that goes into this. So I would pick that one. As much as I hate all the other intersections, that one is foolish. All the way to the boys club, all the way to the gas station in
How
the
big is
summertime.
that roundabout gonna be?
Is it 90 feet?
Which,
Circle?
are we talking about
The
the,
circle. They've changed it a couple times. And you missed the avocado, by the way.
yeah, are we talking about the four
High
corners?
school roundabout circle. How big was the circle?
Same as the Sparks Avenue.
Same as Fox Avenue, whatever that is. Was it 90 feet or 70?
I think the outer is 120
Is it?
feet.
You were saying Bartlett.
The landscape
No.
circle is 40
You
feet.
say the high school?
High school intersection is the one we need to do. Not even a question.
I think
It might
that's
be
It's number one.
absolutely the
Might be
most
on
controversial
planning.
one.
It's the most controversial, but it's the one that needs the most, regardless of whether it's controversial.
Get in.
You can't drive, you can't navigate
It
it.
shows up a lot.
Look what it causes.
Packets.
I agree.
Yeah.
Two sides, and the other two sides jump right in. When you're on Prospect Street coming down, you can just jump right into the intersection. When there's people all the way to the second Cumberland Farms. Well, the first Cumberland Farms, I guess we'll call it now. My son calls it the old one. Go ahead.
Think about this. If town meeting wasn't in the fall, if town meeting was like the last week of August,
Oh,
when traffic, everyone is so fed up
Oh.
with traffic, would they vote for roundabouts?
I don't think people are convinced that it, and I don't think at that time a rotary is going to help traffic in August.
yeah, well,
No,
it's
but-
always
oh,
gonna,
wait.
somebody's always gonna be moving. See, that's the thing, David. This is
Down to the next
sure there
stop
is.
sign, though, Matt.
No, but see, this is where we get into this, okay, we're gonna just make it go somewhere else. But it spreads out the vehicles, okay? If you take and sit at the post office on a Sunday for 20 minutes and just sit there and watch it, you gotta watch it. There's never a time where a vehicle isn't moving, no matter how busy it is or how not busy it is. At our intersection, you can have 3 cars out of 4 spaces and no one's moving because you're going, I wonder what that person's doing. And you're thinking this person, there's nothing worse when somebody's waving you to go all the way around in front of
It's
them
like
when they should have just gone.
But
That's what intersections
the
do.
Old South Road, the Milestone Rotary, basically coming from Old South Road, is a rotary from that side. Would it,
Not a roundabout, a rotary.
a roundabout, what, if we added another lane, it would make it a?
No, it's the angling. See, this is where Ken needs to meet with Dave.
Coming from Old South Road, it's pretty close to a roundabout. Coming south, or heading north
It's a 3-way stop and a yield.
towards down.
The most part that's a roundabout is coming from Wisconsin.
Concept, yeah, because it's got the yield. And you could
It's
slide.
David, all right, here's how I explain a roundabout to somebody that's not familiar with the folding of the
I
vehicles.
don't have any idea.
It's folding. Route 1 versus 93. When Route 1 was built, you have to stop. Like, you just can't merge to Route 1.
Yeah.
When you're in Lynn or Saugus, you have to stop.
Yeah.
But 93, I mean, you can be like with one eye and sort of go onto the highway and find your opening. Because there's width and it allows for the vehicle that's in the first lane to sort of merge in with you. That's how a roundabout works. It angles the vehicle to find an opening with another car. That's just the
I think
truth.
it's way more complex than that, though. It's a perceived
It
gap
happens
that
by
people
itself.
feel they
Yeah.
need to get in, and by that, everyone has a different perception of the gap. A little old lady's gap needs to be a tractor trailer.
Well,
but
no,
your
and
gap
that's
needs to
fine.
be this big.
But it still keeps it
So
moving one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we
That's
could
true, but
debate
the
this.
consultants who
Yeah.
came out and talked about rotaries were looking at the rotary system in the island as a whole.
Yeah, that's what
Individual rotaries don't work.
you have to
But
have
you
everything
to
done at one
every
time.
intersection has to be controlled, so it's not, people don't speed
Except
from
5
point
corners.
to point. It
Never gonna do
slows them
5
down,
corners.
actually, in some funny ways. It keeps the pace, the idea of sticking one on,
Belvedere?
Hooper Farm. You know, I mean, it was just like an extra slowdown came into town, and it regulates the controls the speed of all the cars, and so you don't have that quick zip to the next one. It's kind of he was thinking the whole package.
It's
So
like a
it
gear
won't be
train.
An issue, down on another intersection until that.
It's a
Well,
it's
the
a
Milk Street stop sign, what's gonna happen there?
yeah. Stop
Milk
signs don't
Street?
work. Gotta get rid of the stop sign.
where
The stop sign,
Further down towards Vesta.
coming off Prospect,
Prospect.
if you put a
Yeah,
rotary at
that's
the
a bad
hospital,
intersection,
what's
too.
gonna happen there? When
Yeah.
you have more vehicles.
Well,
Yeah.
first of all, the vehicles. Well, it's going to keep.
Nat, there's still gonna be 250 cars at peak hour going
Yeah,
down
I mean,
that road.
it's not gonna
Whether they
make
get-
it.
whether they
in
get there at
January.
223 or
A rotary doesn't
224, it
make
really doesn't make a difference.
January. It just makes things less frustrating and it keeps it more parity. It's fair. When you, I feel guilty coming from Prospect.
Oh, yeah, because it's.
Because you jump in.
Yeah.
And everybody's been, they're on there on their, the sixth song on the radios come on by the time they get to the stop sign.
Just like.
You want
All right, no, you're fine.
you want a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, I'd say we should adjourn.
Second.
All right. Thank you all. I'm still glad we talked. Derek, talk to us about the professional way to explain roundabouts in May 21st.